Welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. This is the podcast where we help you challenge your mindset and discover where you are. Tired of stories about other people's success? We can help you change your life, determine your time freedom point, and join us on the journey to financial success. Let's go. Hey, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Ideal Investor Show, where we bring you great guests. And today we have a especially great guest. We're going to talk only about the Marines and the Air Force. No, I'm just kidding. But we have two military veterans on the call today, myself, and welcome to the show, Maura.
Thank you so much for having me, Axel. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad. And full disclosure, we've done this before. Maura invited me to her podcast. I'm very grateful for that. And so thanks for making time to come to our audience. Tell us a little bit, how did you go from the Marines to being a real estate executive?
Well, great question. So I was lucky enough to grow up with my parents, my father and stepmother, being real estate investors and developers. So as I was growing up, I kind of got to watch them build their business from the ground up. And now they are, on a really high level. So like a lot of young people, I wanted to go do my totally own thing. And so right after college, literally 2 weeks after I graduated from college, I went to officer boot camp. I served in the Marines for 10 years. Best experience of my life. No regrets. There's no better job as a young person. However, I ended up meeting my husband in the Marine Corps. And eventually it kind of came time for us to make a big decision about if we wanted to have a family or if we wanted to do a full career in the Marines. And from watching some of my other colleagues try to navigate being parents and still being active duty, I just thought, okay, that's very stressful. That's not what I want. So we both decided to get out of the military, go to business school, and make a big transition into business. And because I had seen my parents' example, I really knew that I wanted to go into real estate. I went to a real estate specific graduate program, and that is how things got started.
That's very cool and very nice story. Thanks for sharing that. Is your husband helping you?
So funny enough, he also ended up in real estate, but we're not in the same company. So he worked for a different company doing new home construction down here in South Alabama. I can't say all the details, but he is about to start a new venture, also in real estate and construction, but it's kind of on the final phase of that deal going through. So I can't talk too much about it. So basically we're in the same/similar industry, but we don't work in the same company, which that works well for us. I think if we work together, we might kill each other, but it's always been nice because in the Marines and then now we work in the same industry, so we can talk a lot about what we're doing, really know what the other person's going through.
With that being said, and you being in separate companies, can you describe a little bit what your role is, what you're doing on a regular basis, which kind of clients you're serving?
Yes. So I'm the founder and CEO of a small investment firm here in Alabama. It's called Duratus Properties. We flip houses and maintain a rental portfolio that's comprised of long-term rentals and rent-to-own properties. So on a day-to-day basis, I manage a team of 8 people. Myself and my partner run that company. Then I am also a licensed agent here in Alabama, and I specialize in helping other investors. So I pretty much work exclusively with investors to help them also grow their portfolios, whether it's in residential or commercial. I also was a managing partner in a property management firm here. However, when I had my kids, I exited out of that, but it was a great experience. I did that for 3 years and was at one point managing 600 units here in Alabama.
Okay, very cool. And probably gave you lots of experience on all kinds of things that can happen. Now, you mentioned that you're also serving investors, help them to grow their portfolio. Can you describe a little bit the area where you're in? I mean, I've been in LA, some people call it, but maybe you can describe, because I oftentimes find, when I talk about it, for example, a beach, a lot of people say Alabama has a beach. I never knew that, right? So can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I live in an amazing place called Fairhope, Alabama, and it used to be kind of a hidden secret, but the secret has gotten out a little bit. It's very close to both Mobile Bay and Gulf Shores. Some people might have heard of Orange Beach, which is kind of our most famous beach here, but it is wonderful. I live close to the beach and close to the bay. It's just stunningly gorgeous. The cost of living is very affordable. I cannot imagine a better place to raise a family. And like Axel, I was in the military, so I lived all over the world. And there is no place I would rather put down roots and raise my family than where I am now in Fairhope, Alabama. So if you haven't been here, you have to put Fairhope, Alabama on your list. It is worth coming to see. It is so cute, stunningly beautiful, near some very beautiful beaches. But from an investment standpoint, I work here. Fairhope is in a county called Baldwin County, Alabama. And then right across the bay is Mobile. A lot of people have heard of Mobile, so that's
Right,
Mobile
right.
County. And then I also serve Birmingham, Alabama. That's actually where I started my company, and that's about 4 hours north of Fairhope. My partner still lives there. A bunch of our operations are still in Birmingham, still know the market really well. So Birmingham, Mobile, and Baldwin County, Alabama is where I focus.
Right. Yeah, that's good. And thanks for that description. One thing that I did a little bit of research, admittedly, about 2 years ago, and was quite surprised, and maybe want to touch a little bit about that because I think there might be a misconception of what's kind of like the economic environment in Alabama. And obviously, it's a pretty big state. But when I did some research about Birmingham, it at least had at the time shown on their city website and stuff that they have secured or attracted a lot of corporate investment. So maybe you can tell people a little bit, how much is Alabama still this kind of like agricultural state with some military affiliation in the north there, Huntsville area and stuff like that, and how much has it actually changed? I know that, for example, several car makers have started working there and pretty big factories and stuff. Can you tell a little bit, because investors obviously are always interested in the economic and basically opportunity environment?
That is a great question. So Alabama is booming. If people don't know that, it is a great place to invest for a lot of reasons. Regarding growth, we've had so much happen. We've benefited from some macro trends. So a lot of people have probably heard about the rise of the Sun Belt. And that was really amplified during COVID. A lot of people moved out of the cities and into the Sun Belt. And people kind of probably automatically think Florida. A lot of people move to Florida. Well, I literally can drive, like, it's 30 minutes into Pensacola, Florida. So the same beaches that people associate with Destin and Pensacola, that is what we have here. We have all the same things except an even lower cost of living. So some people have figured that out, and we're having a ton of growth in my area. If you look up Baldwin County, Alabama, it's been one of the fastest growing MSAs in the country for the past 5 years. Birmingham has done some amazing, amazing things in the past 5 to 10 years. They have an incredible mayor who's attracted a ton of new businesses. He has done a bunch of public-private partnerships to spur new business and also improve education. Him and his administration have done an absolutely amazing job. A lot of people have heard of Huntsville and everything that's going on with SpaceX, the new FBI campus. There's Space Force is, it's still kind of up in the air what's going to happen with that, but a lot is happening in Huntsville. So across the board, a lot is happening in Alabama. But at least right now, still the cost of living and home prices are still relatively low. So I think it is such a good place, especially to start your investing, because you can acquire properties for relatively cheap. They cash flow really well, especially in the Birmingham and Mobile markets where I'm at. It's been a fantastic place to grow a real estate business. And a lot of people come to me because they live in some high cost of living areas and they would like their money to go a little farther. And this is a great place to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for describing that. And maybe we can kind of add one more aspect to it, because a lot of people from an investor lens, make the assumption if something is comparatively affordable, that also could be an indication that the economic strength, meaning like if you, for example, invest in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house somewhere where you would recommend to do that, that the tenants that you would put in would also potentially not be particularly financially strong unless you do Airbnb or something like that. Can you talk a little bit about that ratio between the cost of purchasing residential properties versus rent levels and payment dependability?
I think we'll start at, in general, the cost of living in Alabama is lower. So your housing prices are lower, but it's all relative. So
Right.
we still have the same classes of housing that you have anywhere throughout the country. When you talk about having A, B, C,
Right.
and D class housing, you're going to find all of that in Alabama. So if you want to focus on class B housing, that's a lot of what we focus on, which is kind of like workforce and lower level professional housing. As I mentioned, we have major metropolitan cities, Birmingham, Mobile, Tuscaloosa, Huntsville, with huge facilities. I mean, down here in Mobile, we have a huge port facility and everything that goes along with that. So you have all levels of professionals and workers in this area and in these cities, and they're no different from anywhere else. The challenges that you're going to have in class A and B housing are probably going to be pretty similar here in Alabama to what you would experience in other parts of the country. And same if you get in class C and D housing, those have totally different challenges. We have those here as well. Like I said, I've lived all over the place. My family invests all over the world. And I don't think that Alabama is so different, other than the fact that your buy-in is a lot lower than it is in other parts of the country. And
Okay.
hey, one more thing though is one big difference though is our laws. Alabama is a landlord friendly state. Unlike some other notorious states, we are a landlord friendly state. The law favors the landlord, which is very helpful as an investor. If you ever have to go through a legal proceeding like a foreclosure or eviction, things tend to happen a lot more expediently here than in some other places. So that might be a difference for people.
Yeah, that definitely, as an investor myself and lots of my clients being investors, that is definitely something that we always take into consideration when you have basically two deals that are about the same price and about the same kind of circumstances, to really ask a set of rules in the location if it is far enough apart that it's in different states. And sometimes it can even be a difference in the cities, right? Like some cities are run more liberally, others are more landlord friendly. So that's something definitely to look into. Now, I have a little bit bigger picture question for you. I think I'm seeing a little bit of a shift, and that is the ability of people, especially when they're tenants in like single family or like something maybe like a duplex, but not really apartment, as far as how far their income that they're making is actually lasting them for all the different things that you need within a month. What's your observation about people's income?
That's a good question. For our portfolio, we do require kind of the standard. We require people to make 3 times as much money as their rent payment. So if their rent payment is $1,000, they have to make a minimum of $3,000 to be approved for one of our houses. I think because we mandate that ratio, we kind of force people into what should be a sustainable living situation. On a bigger scale, I think my observation is that it seems like everyone is kind of struggling right now, that the cost of living has gone up everywhere, including here, and people's money just isn't going as far as it used to. People just seem a little bit more stressed. One thing that we've done with our portfolio is, like I mentioned in the beginning, we do both regular long-term rentals and we do rent to own. And right now we are focusing a lot more on our rent to own line of business than on the long-term rentals. I can dive deep into that if you want, but we've just seen that our rent to own, the portion of our rent to own portfolio is outperforming our long-term rental portfolio by a pretty significant amount. And that may be somewhat indicative of this kind of pressure that people, I think, across the board are under right now.
Right. Yeah, and I appreciate that really cautious perspective. What I've seen is if you have requirements like you mentioned, and I think they're pretty normal, pretty standard almost. But what is not uncommon, and I see this in my portfolio too, is that you have a couple that wants to rent a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, or 4-bedroom, 2-bath house or something like that. And they show the income and they sign on the lease together and stuff like that. And even in your example, $3,000 on $1,000 rent, not a problem. And then one of them loses their job, and then suddenly everything changes, right? And so that is a thing. It's, like I was pretty shocked, to be honest, and this has happened since we last spoke, so it's kind of fresh when I heard that suddenly almost 1 million less jobs were created than they were officially originally mentioned, right? Like that sounds like, okay, this is just a number, but if you imagine those 1 million people, and they're not all singles fresh out of college, right? Like they're in families and stuff like that, and so forth. So that's definitely something I find quite interesting. Now, on the rent to own model, I mean, when you look at it through that lens, can you position this rent to own model, how you actually keep that in balance? Because ultimately, I know 30 years is a very long time, but ultimately you're not really the owner of the property anymore. So that's something different than if somebody says, okay, I buy a bunch of houses over time and I rent them out and I keep them basically forever. And so I have this income source, right?
Yes. There's, like everything, there's pros and cons to both, and we still do both. And it's kind of nice to have some diversification there. I'll talk a little bit about how we do it, because there are different ways to do rent to own. And then people probably have heard about lease options, which is similar, but a little bit different. So rent to own for us, basically, we have a client that for whatever reason doesn't want to or can't qualify for a traditional mortgage with a bank. So they will come to us. They will want to enter into our rent to own program, where they sign a contract for deed. They put down a down payment. So they're actually investing equity into the property. This is what makes it different than a lease option. They're not buying an option to buy the property later. They're investing now with the understanding that upon their final payment, the deed will be transferred into their name and they will now be the owners of the property. We don't only serve this community, but we do focus on the Hispanic community here in Birmingham. And that happened kind of organically because we flip a lot of houses. We were working with some Hispanic crews out here. And at one point, a couple of them just approached us and asked if we could help finance their personal house. And it wasn't a line of business at the time. We were like, okay, yeah, these guys are great. We'll help them do that. And then slowly word started to spread that this is something that our company did. And so that's when we started getting more demand for this. So we started looking at it and then ended up formalizing it as a line of business. And so we've been doing this for a few years now. And what we've found is that it's been tremendously beneficial for us as investors because, number one, we require a pretty significant down payment, usually anywhere from 10 to 20% down, and that's non-refundable. So the mechanics of it are our company buys the property, we secure the loan, the deed is in our name until the final payment is made, at which point it transfers. So then we match a property with a client. Right now we have a wait list of clients wanting to get into one of our houses, and they'll put down a down payment, which covers usually more than what we had to put down on the loan. And then their monthly payments, usually the loans are amortized over 10 to anywhere between 10 and 20 years. I would say our most common is 15, although we do give the client the option if they want a shorter loan period. And their payments cover the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, although the insurance is also held in our name. It's kind of important for liability in your loan. But the other big thing is that the client is responsible for the maintenance of the property. That is where the cash flow difference really happens. So as the investor, you're making money up front on the down payment. You're making money on the spread from your interest. So we're charged an interest rate from the bank. Right now it's very high. It's like 8%. So we have to charge anywhere from 12 to 15% to our clients. So you're making a little spread every month on that. And then you don't have any of the maintenance costs because your clients are responsible for that. And then the final way that you kind of benefit is because we are still own for the time that we own the property, usually 15 years, you still get all the tax benefits that you would get from a regular long-term rental while you own the property. So it's been pretty advantageous. But to your point, yes, at the end of the loan term, 15 years, the property transfers to the client and you're going to have to continually get more properties to have that cash flow. So there's pros and cons.
Right. Understood. Now, for the appreciation, do you apply a certain percentage as an average appreciation for the property?
Yes, we buy it at one price and sell it at a higher price. So for example, I'll say our average deal, and this is exactly a deal that I'm working on right now. We bought a property for $85,000 and we're about to sell it to the end buyer for $120,000.
And that's like what, 4.5%, 5% per year for 15 years or something like that? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I meant, right? Like if you go long term, I know nationwide is always a little tricky, but if you look at residential real estate, I think it's like 4.2, 4.3% or so over like the last 50 years. You want to have hopefully at least a little bit more than inflation.
Yes, exactly.
And now one other thing that I've seen was super intrigued, but I wonder if you would be doing something like that. And this happened since we last spoke, and I screwed it up with the recording. And that was the idea to say, how about if you have people that are part of a crew, which to me means like a crew that does either renovations or flipping or construction or stuff like that, to say, how about instead of 85, which is probably already livable, to go lower and get something where entry level is kind of half, like find something for like 45, 50, but they have to basically do the renovation. Is that an option, or is it always a house that is good enough to basically move in and live in?
That's a great question. So yes, because a lot of our tenants are contractors, first of all, a lot of our houses, they're not like the perfect move-in ready house that a normal residential client is looking at. So yeah, sometimes they want a fixer-upper because they have the ability and the people to do the work. I would say our most common product is one that needs like a light cosmetic rehab, not a full gut rehab, but a lot of our clients want one that needs a little bit of cosmetic work. But we've had several of our clients put additions on. We had a client put a whole new kitchen, add a room with a bathroom. A lot of them are adding pretty substantial value to the houses, which is another amazing benefit.
Well, and if they're part of a crew, they're probably not doing it all by themselves. They just bring the buddies for the weekend or after work or stuff like that. Quick thing, because that is one thing that we recently started running into with some clients in deals along those lines that we're discussing, and that is minimum loan amounts. Do you have some kind of trick, or do you deal with that, or how do you handle that?
Well, for us, we work with some local portfolio lenders here, and we've worked with these banks for a long time, and they actually love to write these loans. And because they're portfolio lenders, they don't have some of the restrictions or requirements that maybe other bigger banks have. Our bank that writes these loans, this is their favorite loan to write for us. They haven't put any restrictions on the number of loans that we can have.
Right.
But
well,
granted,
I'm asking,
sorry,
Maura,
maybe
I'm asking it mainly if somebody like myself or somebody who's listening to us says, "Wow, that sounds like such a good investing opportunity." Would your lenders, whether they're portfolio lenders or banks, work with investors, or are you talking about your company yourself basically purchasing something?
Yes.
Because there's obviously a huge difference. If you say we're a local company, we're doing this, we're using, or the occupants are going to be local contracting crew members or stuff like, it's a little different than like me sitting in San Diego and say, Maura, I want one of those. Can we make that happen?
Yes. Exactly. Okay. So we have had a lot of interest in this program. So we have started helping put deals together for people with our lender so that our lender knows, okay, this is still part of the Duratus program. They know our screening
Right.
process and they've seen our loan, our performance on our loans. So that's how we've been starting to help people now is basically we'll broker the deal. We'll find the house. We have the client, we do the screening, all of that, put the deal together. And then we also help the investor get their loan set up with our bank. And that's how we've helped people do the program. I can't really speak to how it would work with other lenders in other states.
I didn't mean it that way. I meant like literally, because on first glance, the way you described it sounded to me saying, okay, so here's the house, here's basically the seller being like your company, here's, the investor is kind of becoming the owner until the rent to own occupant is basically paying it off in 10, 12, 15 years or so. So more like a facilitation of a deal.
Yeah, I mean that is kind of what we have started to do for investors because that people are interested. But rent to own, it's not, we didn't reinvent the wheel or anything. But in practice, it is there's a lot more moving pieces than you might think. So, one being that like we focus on the Hispanic community, we have 5 bilingual Hispanic team members. So we have one that's in charge of marketing to the Hispanic market. We have a Hispanic showing assistant that's on the ground showing the families. We have closing coordinator that's bilingual, that's talking them, like showing them everything in the contract and helping facilitate the closing. And then a property manager that's bilingual. Because I mean, the property management side is minimal, which I love, but you still need someone who's bilingual, who's going to communicate with all the clients and collect their payments every month. So it's funny because it's not an overly complex concept at all, but it's like a lot of things in real estate where the actual execution of it, it's just a little more involved than you might think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the things for our audience, and this may go a little bit over your head since we're talking about it rather quickly, is obviously also a little bit of a legal challenge, right? Like on the one hand, if you say, okay, how cool is it if this future owner is finding financing on his or her own, so they can basically get rid of the loan that we originally gave them. We're making basically the profit, we can invest it into 2 new ones. That's kind of like the great case 3, 4, 5 years after they started. The other case is, okay, they made a down payment non-refundable and pick any number of months, whatever the circumstances, they get injured, they don't have income anymore, they can't pay. Well, you got to plan for that properly in your documents, in your contracts and stuff like that, because they're basically in a way similar to a tenant who doesn't pay the rent, even though they have paperwork to ultimately become the owners. But at the moment that they start struggling financially or not coming up to their obligations. The other thing that I've also seen is, yes, we love the fact that they are basically taking care of the house, but if they don't, for whatever reason, right? Some family in Mexico is ill and they leave, and the city starts sending you notices for trash and non-mowed lawns and all this kind of nice stuff, right? So there's a whole bunch of things where the relationship is a little different than it is when you just have straight out, I own the property, you're the tenant. If you don't do your obligations, you either leave voluntarily or I have to make you leave.
Exactly. It's in a way, it's not too dissimilar from your model where you're working with these turnkey companies and you have your teams in different markets. It's just a slight variation on that where you still need your team of people on the ground to do whatever, because we've been doing it for a few years and we've encountered all sorts of issues. You had a tree fall on a house and had to go through the whole insurance claim process. We've had a deportation happen, and how do you deal with that? We've been able to document all these things and we have the processes. So I'm not saying that people couldn't do this on their own or that they shouldn't, but I think just like how your model works with your clients, it's very nice to have a team on the ground that knows what they're doing and has all the people in place to take care of things if you want your investment to be more passive and probably a little less risky.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one thing why I enjoy so much that you came on the show today is to touch a little bit on all the benefits, because sometimes people I've seen say, how much can it be? Well, now that we talked a little bit about it, and that's probably still only like the upper portion of the iceberg that we were able to touch on. There is a lot to consider, and so it's actually tremendous value to work with somebody. So if we intrigued somebody listening to us today, how can they get in touch with you?
Probably the best way is to check out our website, duratusproperties.com. That's DURATUS properties.com. And we have a section on there where if you're interested, you can just click invest with us, and we have some videos about how the program works. My email, Maura@duratusproperties.com, is also on our website. So that's probably the best way.
Okay, very cool. And we're going to put all that in the show notes anyway. So with all that being said, I always ask a question at the end, not directly related. So today I want to ask you, if you could meet anybody, past or present or future, maybe, who would it be and why?
I would love to be able to meet Cleopatra because, first of all, I just love the Egyptian history. And Cleopatra just seems like she was an absolute badass, very ahead of her time, avant-garde woman. And it would, I think, just be amazing to be able to have a cocktail with her and talk about some of the crazy things she did in her perspective. That's who I would choose.
So you want to know how she wrangled the Romans, huh?
Yes.
All right, very cool. Well, thank you so much, Maura, for being on the show, for sharing what you're doing. I think it's amazing what you do, and congratulations on all your success. And maybe we can do it again sometime in the future.
Yes, that would be amazing. Thank you for having me on. It was so great to talk to you again.
Same here. Thank you.